The problem is the distribution of that average. And I think we have a very unjust city. We have a comuna like Vitacura, where we're now, where you have 18 square meters per habitant of green areas. And you have other comunas where you have less than 1 square meter per inhabitant. So, and you could talk about the people in the health centers and the number of police per inhabitant. So one of the problems we have as a society, and I take this to Sam, is that we have been able as a society to reduce poverty in a very rapid way. And we have been able to make very strong advances in terms of infrastructure, and you have seen it, free flow highways and things alike. The point is that the inequality of our society is still too high. And if you are thinking in the long term, not only in the short term, you need to have more cohesion. And that means more just distribution of public goods, meaning safety, meaning green areas, meaning, education. We're just in the middle of a national discussion. If you are a person with the means, you pay $1,000 for the education of your kid. But if you live in a poor area, you get, $40. So that inequality, I think, is a shout to the sky. I mean, we need to acknowledge what Fernando has said, that we are live in a livable city, but distribution of that quality of life is very unequal. And we need to work hard to overcome that inequality.
I would just give an example to your point, Claudio. I grew up in a mid-sized city in the United States called Baltimore, Maryland. And there were riots when I was in high school, 1969. So in 68, 69, I was still in secondary school, not university. The mayor was a guy, Mayor Schaefer. And there were racial issues. Inner parts of the city were burned down. It wasn't fair, etc. And he was a 3-term mayor. Lived with his mother, was committed to the city. I found it fascinating what he did, because I ended up doing some things to help him when I worked for IBM, but this was earlier on. What he did was he created a program called home ownership. People said the problem is you had to have affordable housing, but then they burned down the affordable housing. So he said, no, we're going to have ownership housing, and there'll be a public-private partnership. So the city will pick up some, the private sector will pick up some, and you're going to own a piece of the house. They never burned the houses down again. It was their house. And yeah, they had to pay back the guys in the private sector that helped them with very modest loans, and it was subsidized by the government, et cetera. Everybody participated. Of course, business was better off because it was safer. People spent more money. They come back to the city where they operate. It all made sense. I just use it as an example of the collaboration point that you're on. At the time, everybody in that paradigm was in fact, the guy who was running the Housing Commission was a Harvard graduate, by the way, then went on to be Secretary of Housing in the Carter administration. But the point was that they changed the entire paradigm. And certainly they made it fair. But they changed it from giving, right, to you own. And I think that's really, really important. For example, if you look at, I'll give you another piece of data. This is the U.S. sets of data. People talk about 9.6% unemployment is extremely high, and it is, and it's unfair. But if you look at college graduates, advanced degrees, there is no unemployment. If you have a master's or a bachelor's or you have an engineering degree, there is no unemployment. In fact, there's a shortage of skills. But if you look at construction, right, housing, there is, I think, 16% unemployment. So on average, to your point. So the question is that in the United States, should you go build lots more houses, or should you educate the people for the future jobs? That'll be a debate. People will make decisions. I will just argue that if you took the money versus building more houses and you actually educated the people for the future jobs, we'd all be better off. Maybe you can't sell it politically. I don't know. I'm not a politician, right? But, I sat down with Mayor Bloomberg and Joe Klein, who's the chancellor of the school systems. We sat down and said, we need these kinds of skills. I don't need 16 years of education. I need 14. But I leave these kinds of classes for 14 years. In 2 weeks, the chancellor of the school system and the mayor went out and announced a new school. And IBM and New York City and education are going to create the new school. So, I mean, I just think, I'm just trying to support you with examples, not to make this thing an IBM commercial, but you could say riots were awful, right? Riots were awful. But they stopped burning down their houses when they owned them. You know, you could say, gosh, 9.6% unemployment is terrible, and it is, and 16% of construction is not, it's not good. But the answer isn't go build more houses and create another bubble. The answer is train the people so you can deploy them in other ways. And I think that's the role we all have. I'm not going to give you an impassioned plea of collaboration, but all of us have a self-interest in making that work. In business, government, universities, we all have a self-interest in making that work. And then it will work because it's sustainable. And when self-interests aren't served, government self-interest, the citizen self-interest, the universities, and if their self-interests are not served, it's never sustainable. A couple of years will be fine. Maybe you become president, you don't care anymore, and I'm teasing. I'm teasing with friends, all right? But it's not sustainable.
You made his day.
But
we are
overtime.
I can give you more time. Go ahead. I'll give you. Go ahead, Claudio.
I
can give you time.
I like this thing about IBM and the City Hall of New York building a school. So we'll talk about that later. No. I just want to say one of the things I think we lack not only in Chile but everywhere is that this common sense of purpose. I mean, it's not only a matter of self-interest. And maybe we can get into an argument here, because I do think that you need to have ownership of not only the house, but also your future. But then when a society starts thinking that it's only a matter of rights that I recall from someone else. And we have that problem in Chile as well. People are demanding the state that they provide them the rights for everything. And one of the things we learn is unless you have a sense of co-responsibility with your own future, with your neighborhood, and with your country, that won't work. I mean, demanding rights all the time without a sense of duty and personal commitment would not work. I say, and I think Claudio Sandor, which is my colleague from Puente Alto, will say the same thing. Nobody will get out of poverty only with gifts. I mean, they demand a work, but they need to work, and they need to be trained. And then what the state can do with the private sector is provide them, with opportunities. But the same thing with, with the cleanness of the city, with the safety of the city. If you're locked in your house without any sense of community, without knowing who lives next door, you can put all the policemen you want on the streets. You will never have a safe neighborhood. So the sense of co-responsibility, even though I'm not disregarding the sense of self-interest, but I'm just saying that there's also a sense of community interest, of common interest, that we need to seed in our kids and foster in our society in order to have a common sense of purpose in the long term.
No, I agree. Let me say it differently because my English is poor.
You're not a politician, you don't speak English. Tell me you run a small business.
I run a small But what I meant by that, we were saying really the same thing, which is that there has to be benefit, mutual benefit, right? I agree. And then when things are of mutual benefit, they do have longevity. They're strategic and sustainable. But if there's not mutual benefit, if someone is getting what they feel is an unfair deal, poor English, I admit, right? A disadvantaged position, then you won't get the support. So I completely agree. And I think the analogies are true. And the analogies are true for business. I mean, we all know that. Fernando, you have to have the same thing. Everybody needs to feel that they're getting a fair deal. Your employees, if they have to sacrifice, they have to think it's fair, that they weren't singled out. If things get better, they want to share in the benefits, et cetera, et cetera. So I think people want this fair deal, and that's what you're saying. Now, the challenge for all of us, quite honestly, the challenge is when we do these smart cities, I think the challenge is how do you create consensus, get support around what is fair and purposeful, right, that they prove they believe will work. Mm-hmm. What do they believe works, right? You and I know that if they work hard in math and science, they're going to make more money. But when they're 14 years old, if they're males, they don't believe, maybe females, but males do not believe that at 14 or 15. They don't, you know, we were males at 14 or 15 years old. You know what our motivation is. It's not that. It's not math and science, unless you're Irving, of course. We have other motivations. So my only point is that, you know, how do you get that established? And I think that, you know, you've said it, and I'm just going to support you on this in any way we can. We've done the assessment. You need proof points. You know, right? You need to demonstrate that this project of recycling of garbage in this particular we'd say community or Kubu worked, right? It worked, in, you know, in that analogy. Or that if you could solve the water distribution system and pick up 25% and then put it into education, you know, that would work, right? So, I mean, it's those kinds of things. I think you need, just like we need in business, proof points that, you know, this thing, call it whatever you want, this congestion system works because they did it in 8 cities. So we can show you it will work, right? And here's how you do it. You need proof points.
How do you do it when the times don't match? The time of your political mandate is shorter than the time of the policy you implemented to give results. You either have a tremendous incentive. Let's the next. He can play. He can postulate president as well.
But you know what, Fernando, I was thinking that
how do you do that?
But the companies have the same problem as well. I mean, first quarter, second quarter, third quarter. I mean, when you have a short-term
I'm elected every year.
When you have a short-term measure, though, Sam, when you have a short-term measure, be it, you know, revenues or being votes, I mean, it's a challenge to have a middle and long-term view of what society is going to look like. And I think all this saying in the business world about corporate social responsibility in the middle term has been factored in the equation of what a good business is today.
Yes, right.
And I think in politics as well. We're thinking of how do you not only measure what the mayor did the first 6 months, but whether that development strategy for the city is sustainable over time. And as you mentioned, that means that the business people think this is a good strategy, that the citizens think it's a good strategy, and also that other partners, and of course, the leading...
Fernando will give the...
You wrap it up for the closing comment.
Well, I think you always have to think in the future and don't think about the period you are left in your job. So you have to produce a difference and changes that are permanent, that cannot be returned. So I don't think, I think the state is a complete, it's like life. It is independent of the people that is managing it. So that doesn't have importance if you are a short period, but you can make some changes that are important for the future. I think they will be, probably someone else will have the honor, but the changes will be permanent.
Well, we haven't spoken one single word about chips or about interfaces, and I think that speaks about the smarter city being for the people and by the people, not by the machines at all.
Great.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Fernando. Thank you very much.